Be sure to watch my TED Talk on londonreal.tv. Shall we do this?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. This is Silicon Reel, the video podcast dedicated to the people of London's technology startup scene. I am Brian Rose. I'm also the host of London Reel. It's a similar but longer trialogue format that features guests like drug smugglers and cage fighters, and politicians sometimes too. My co-host is Mr. Colin Pyle. This is his idea. If you don't like it, you can email him. Personally, yeah, if you want. Colin comes to us via Toronto, China, and India. He's got quite a cool story about riding motorcycles. If you want to hear more about him, we did a show with him on London Reel about a month ago. I think it was called Motorcycling Across China.
I think so,
I try to keep the titles simple.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, so yeah, there you go. And our guest today is Courtney Boyd Myers, who began her career writing for publications like Forbes Magazine, Huffington Post, and the IEEE Spectrum. That one stuck out at me. Do you want to know why?
Why?
When I was in 7th grade at the Greater San Diego Science Fair, I won the IEEE award.
Really?
For my science fair project. I was a bad little motherfucker.
What was the project?
It was, I built like a cathode ray tube on my own with my own vacuum pump, and I was like sending electrons through it and all that stuff.
Wow.
I was like a serial science fair kid. I mean, I went to state level and...
Really?
Yeah, that was my thing.
Wow.
Have you heard of Dean Kamen's FIRST program?
No.
It's
Should I have?
It's a way to get it's for inspiration and recognition in science and technology, and it's a way to get kids as excited about engineering as most kids are as excited about football. And so it's a robotic soccer or football game, and then the kids get together in teams and build these robots and play soccer.
I know, I don't see the science fairs here. They kill me. We'll talk about that later. But I got cash and a savings bond as well.
Wow.
So I still remember it. Yeah.
Really?
It was a big deal.
This is a big moment.
Yeah. So anyways, back to Courtney. You moved to London fairly recently, I think from New York, and within 6 months, she was named one of the 100 most influential people in London's tech city. I'm not on that list. You're not on that list.
Not even close.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
She's currently a member of 10 Downing and Tech City's advisory board, and you're a mentor for companies like Seed Camp and BBC Worldwide Labs. And I'm not finished with Courtney. Most recently, she's launched Audienceio, and I think it's a transatlantic company designed to help New York and London-based technology startups grow internationally. You've got clients like YPlan on board, which are big here in London. You've got YPlan app. I'm going to download mine. It's for going out at night. It's very cool. So, and she also blogs about her smoothies in her spare time.
I mean, they have to go somewhere.
And she was voted one of the 100 most influential smoothie bloggers in London.
I wish.
Within the first 6 months. Anyways, welcome to Silicon Reel.
I might be on that list.
Oh, really?
Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Thanks for being here. It's nice to have someone who knows what's going on in New York, because this is a London-focused piece, but we have to notice that there is some stuff going on in New York and Silicon Valley, and so I think you're going to bring a unique perspective.
Sure.
So I have to ask what I'd ask most Yanks. I'm a Yank, you're Canadian, so we're all North American. Moving to London, what do you miss most about New York, and what do you don't miss? What do you just like, this is better here?
There is a unparalleled energy in New York City, and it's like just you feel it when you wake up in the morning, you feel it when you brush past people on the street, you feel it when you go to bed at night. I love the heat of New York, literally. The fact you don't have to wear a jacket out at night is just like amazing.
You don't? It gets cold?
In the summer.
Oh, okay.
The sort of serendipitous interactions you have with people as well, because everyone's just packed together so closely, and you can go from the Lower East Side to Soho to the West Village and all, in one night, no problem. London's a little bit more spread out. In order to go from Shoreditch to Soho to Clerkenwell, it would be like quite costly and not really efficient. And I think that has an impact because you're not running into as many people on a daily basis as you normally would. Like any good expat in London, I complain about the weather, but we're really lucky right now, and like we were talking about earlier, like London in this kind of beautiful sunny weather is the best place in the world.
Unless you're suffering from hay fever.
Oh.
Which I've been...
Yeah, my entire intern staff is all really sick from hay fever.
And it just destroys you.
Really?
Oh,
it just ruins the day.
The ruins, yeah, everything.
I mean, Courtney came here on a bicycle. It's sunny in London.
Yeah.
I think London's more like a suburb than a city because it's just easy. It's spread out and it's fun.
Yeah, and I grew up in the suburbs, so there's something about hearing the trees, outside your window as you're going to bed at night, which is so wonderful, and I will probably never have that in
And
New
not
York.
the sirens, you mean?
Yeah,
or the honking
exactly.
cabs.
There's something really peaceful about London, and someone said the other day, why I think London's a great place to work is because the weather is always shit, and so it doesn't matter if you work on a Saturday and a Sunday,
When it gets dark at 3:30 in the winter, it's like,
yeah,
what else you can
I might as well be on my computer. It's not like I'd
yeah.
rather be doing anything else right now.
Sure.
I always just think when it's a really bad day, I'm like, it'll just clear all the suckers out. So the real people will stay in London, and it just clears the riff out that might be here because of the sun, because you're not here because of the sun.
There's a grittiness about London, which I think is kind of what you're saying, that people are like sticking to it and they love it and they've got a lot of pride, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's like the guys on the wall in Game of Thrones, they're up there and it sucks, but they're like, we're just going to keep doing it.
Exactly.
Maybe that's a bad analogy. Earlier before we started, you were talking about like the similarity between, say, the tech startup scene now and the way it was in New York like 4 or 5 years ago. I might be, and I was just wondering if you could explain that for people that don't know. I mean, a lot of people didn't grow up in the New York tech scene, so
probably like 2009 to 2010 in New York, there was this. We had companies like Foursquare that were founded, companies like Tumblr, these like really social technology companies. Everyone was getting on Twitter and talking there, and the media scene was getting involved with the tech scene, and it was all overlapping. People saw, okay, it actually isn't that hard if I want to quit my job in advertising and go start a company that, maybe I'll work with the creative agencies, maybe I'll be a social platform, and then I'll build it off of what Silicon Valley's built, whether that's like Amazon or Facebook. And I think, we started to see people connecting at ever increasing rates and just networking a bit more, and like more events were happening almost every night. You could go out and find a tech event. The New York Tech Meetup, which is where New York companies come and demo their new products, now has a secondary ticket market for seats in this like huge hall at NYU. The accelerator program started coming in, so we had like first Techstars was one of the big ones, and then now there's probably like 10 or 20 that are all different sizes, and then the co-working spaces, and so you just start to see this whole ecosystem build up. And in the past like 2 years in New York, we started to see like a number of exits, and exits are kind of what makes this whole startup world go round. And now in London, so I think I don't want to say that London's like behind New York in any way, because they're just so different. But, in terms of the amount of events and the amount of co-working spaces and accelerators, there are some similarities to London in 2013 and New York 2009, 2010, where you have like tech and media coming over, websites like Tech City News starting, accelerators like Techstars coming over and opening up their first international campus or first international program here in London. General Assembly, the company that I moved over to London with, is another example. They said, well, we need to open up another campus, and they decided on London over San Francisco. We've seen quite a lot of that, and so there's London's just kind of killing it right now. But it's not at the point of it being too bloated. I feel like people are just, I don't know, it's like the sweet spot. It's a really good time to be here.
How do you think London keeps that trajectory, right? Because New York's kind of, like you said, maybe flattened out a little bit, or just kind of losing that energy. How does London keep that?
Yeah, I don't think New York's losing the energy at all. I think it's just become like really chaotic, and like everyone's in the tech scene, and you don't have to explain to anyone anymore what you do if you say you're a founder or a tech entrepreneur. They no longer think you work in IT. In London, I remember when I first came over here 3 years ago, to explain that I work in tech, people's parents said, "Oh, well, do you just sit around in your boxers all day?" Like, or whatever the female equivalent of that is. And are you homeless? Are you freelancing? Like, what do you mean you own a tech startup? And it just like wasn't as familiar. And now they get it. And now I'm getting, anytime my friends that work in advertising or film are like, have a question about the internet, they come to me, which is quite funny. So like they're starting to get keyed in, and it's starting to permeate other industries in London. New York, it's just like, I would almost use the word saturated. Like, it's almost like people that were involved in it round one are kind of like, oh crap, like now I kind of want to chill out and not go to these events every night, because it's going to be like really crowded basically.
Yeah.
And what it's interesting to see like what we can learn and what we can do right. I mean, obviously, Bryce Keane is one of the co-hosts, and he does the Silicon Drinkabout, which is this really social scene. I've been to about 3 or 4, but I just find it kind of fun. It's not everyone's pitching. It's kind of got that English relaxed vibe to it.
Yeah.
I mean, do we need more things like this? I mean, I call him the lubricant of the machine because he just puts people together and people come to these things and meet each other. I mean, do we need more things like that to keep it on track? Or
yeah, I mean, I have this image in my head right now of like the way cells come together and form, and they form this big blob, and then they break off into lots of little things, and you kind of need these events to become larger and larger and larger so people come to them, and then people are then enabled to break off and form their own kind of events. And maybe Three Beards, with their Silicon Drinkabout, maybe it does become to the point where it's like 300 people on a Friday.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And then maybe they give that to someone else to run, and then the guys are doing their own kind of like 20-person things that are more creative and more involved and just different.
kind of mirrors like social media right now. Like now there's too many friends on Facebook, and now you want a more private group. And we're going to the Drinkabout tonight, and it's at Badoo, which is like a social media
kind of dating
company, and like it's already full. They got 250 people, and they got 150 people on the wait list.
So we're already getting there.
But
you're right to draw the parallels between social networking online and in real life networking, mirroring that. The internet is kind of like the modern day fire or electricity that people are just immediately drawn to, and it's just like kind of a network effect. We hear about it first because we're early adopters and we love the internet and we love media and we're always online sharing. People in other industries are just going to take a little bit more time, but they'll be knocking at the doors, like saying, "Hey, can I get into the Drinkabout? Hey, I want to learn to code. I want in on this too."
Well, what do you think London can do uniquely? Like you see all the businesses here, you're pretty well in touch with what's happening in the scene. Where do you see London winning when, say, the Valley or the Alley won't be able to put certain things together? Are there certain business models or a few things that have really lit up your mind?
Two things. Well, first, there's a bit of like an arbitrage play that London could benefit from, and that's when they see successful business models take off in San Francisco and New York. It's like, why not make those work for London and start your own companies, before the New York guy gets over. And one of the things with Audienceio I'm doing is trying to tell the New York guy, like, hey, someone's going to copycat you unless you stick your brand in the ground over there, and then, vice versa. The second thing is that I think both New York and London have to its advantage is the multitude of industries, is the multitude of creative agencies and brands. So like Silicon Valley has those to a certain extent, but it is mostly these really big tech companies and then the small ones. So while there's probably more access to capital there and maybe more developer talent, here we have the ability to get the CMO of some big brand in the room and like the head of a creative agency and then like a couple founders of startups, and maybe think of a really cool way to like all work together that way. That's something I think is happening more and more in New York and London, something that probably could define London in a way, is like our creative startups, our media focused ones.
And do you think, they say it, and I've been in London for 10 years, that the Yanks don't understand Europe, as in they have a hard time going from what works in America to what works in Europe. And so the best way to do that is kind of go on its doorstep in London, where it's somewhere in between, to try to understand that market. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Yeah, that definitely happens. I think, there's the language barrier, which is obvious. In countries like Germany, we tried to go over there with General Assembly. We had an education model where we were asking people to pay money, and it was like really well received in the States because we were charging $5,000 for a 10-week coding course, which relative to your $40,000 a year tuition isn't that much to bite. But in London, when you're charging £5,000 for a 10-week course, that's quite a lot, because the 1 year tuition is about 9 or 10 these days. Take that to Berlin, and it was just like
tuition's free.
Yeah, it was it was really an uphill battle to get people to understand like why they should pay for this. It was a really new concept. So I think some American companies come over just thinking like, okay, well, what worked for us will work in London and Europe, and I think that's quite arrogant. I think people don't maybe do enough research on the ground and meeting people and interviewing people and figuring out how to adjust the model. Like McDonald's wouldn't just go to India and sell cheeseburgers. So like why are New York startups just coming over to London and sort of shoving in their models as is?
Yeah.
And we had John Collison on last week, and I know you interviewed him. Now, he's got 4 people here now in Clerkenwell, for Stripe. And so you advise brands on how they make this stretch across the Atlantic. And I mean, does it take boots on the ground? Do you need people here out there making those meetings? You can't just get your url.co.uk. I mean, what does it take to get your brand?
It depends on the tech. And I use the example of Foursquare is a very social technology company. Its success was very much built on the fact that the founders, Denz and Naveen, were out in the scene. They were at these events. They were throwing these events. When they sent over 2 really young guys to work on Foursquare in London, and no one even knows where their offices were or who these guys are, and all of a sudden Foursquare was available in the UK iTunes store, and they didn't really make a splash in terms of partnering with any local brands. It was a bit of a failure, which is why when I walked in here and I said, "Do you have a Foursquare in your house?" and you said, "No, what?" It was just it could have been good, and that's an example of a company that needed that face. They needed that, perhaps even a founder moving over and being like, "I'm going to be the founder of Foursquare Europe," or using the kind of McDonald's brand, just okay, you're going to be running in Foursquare London, you're the CEO of that, and give them a share. I think for some companies, which are maybe Stripe, for example, they obviously have a really big team here, and that they need that because they need to partner with all of the companies that are using their technology. I'm trying to think of a company that would not benefit from having someone on the ground, and I can't, nothing really comes to mind.
Just there's cost issues and visa issues, so some of them might be I don't want to spend, hundreds of thousands of pounds to get the office and get this person and get the visa.
Which is why I think finding someone that's local that gets your business model, and if you have a really beautiful business that's attractive to customers, those people will come out of the woodwork to want to be a part of your cause and build your brand for you, in their respective city. I think so listening to those kind of people, getting them involved early on is probably a really good idea.
We were talking sort of New York to London or America to London. What about going the other way around? Do you see the same issues and problems and hiccups from
London to New York?
Or is it a little easier to kind of, it's like jet lag. You don't get as much jet lag going that way.
No, that would be great if it were true.
Yeah.
I've heard of some pretty... Someone the other day said that there have been a number of spectacular failures, and that investors in London are really afraid to let their companies that are even past this Series B round move to New York and make an entrance there, just because it's so noisy in New York. We were talking about earlier, that you literally have to scream above the rest to get heard. And I think it's really costly to enter the U.S. market. Y-Plan's a great example. They've just raised $12.5 million to do it, and they're, running it like a military operation. We're helping them hire a huge team in New York. So they're not pussyfooting around, if you will. They're we're here, we're Y-Plan.
Right, we're not throwing a Friday night party.
And the founders are all over the place. So it does take an incredible amount of work. I would argue that it's harder for London companies to enter the U.S. market than the other way around.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I definitely would get that feel.
Yeah.
Just because you can say the Yanks don't get Europe, but you could also argue that we don't really understand, the New York City mentality and this whole entrepreneurial spirit that built this country, where everyone's maybe already thinking, a lot about that stuff. And like you said, the noise, so you can't get press probably in New York, but you probably can't even get the meetings you want in New York because there's so much going on. And you're we're here. And it's well, unless you're going to climb the Shard, no one's going to pay any attention.
Yeah, and
or you use
not to be self-serving, but that's exactly why I started Audience. It's just I'm here with these London companies. My heart, I love them. I'm just so passionate about seeing them succeed, and I know that the ways that they could do it in the US, and I know it's a lot of hard work, but I would just want to help them get over, because I see these guys that are I really want to move to New York and grow my business there, and I'm you totally should. Let me help you in any way I can, whether it's getting you meetings or getting you press. Those two being sort of my specialty.
Just out of curiosity, how does your revenue model work for entrepreneurs that want your help? Is it because as an entrepreneur, when you're starting up a company, it's always lean startup, or you're trying to keep it. And so spending money on PR is often seen as is it really necessary? Is it required? Do I have to? How do you get around that?
Yeah, I know it's tricky, and a lot of people in the client services business for startups struggle.
Yeah.
PR companies are an example of people who've done this before. And when I said, hey, I'm going to start a marketing consultancy for startups, people were like, that's a retarded idea. There's no way it's going to scale. And I was like, all right, well, how we do it is we're not working with companies that can't afford to think about hiring someone in marketing.
Okay.
So they're past that level where they have a product, it's beautifully designed. They've got the dev and design team, but and they've probably got a ton of great content that can be turned into free marketing if positioned correctly. They're just in the stage where they need those partnerships and that help. And we found the sweet spot for companies for us to work with is when they're past the Series A round.
Okay. Bit of cash in the bank.
Yeah, so they're thinking about growth as their number one, ambition.
Right.
So yeah, and I've totally had so many conversations with people that are seed even, that I love, they're good friends, and I'm just
I can't help you.
Yeah, it's they say that you should always take 20 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is to help someone in your industry not think about getting paid or whatever. So I spend those coffee meetings with them, and maybe it'll benefit a lot further down the line. Maybe
once they get their Series A, they then come to you for help, right?
But you're not a PR company, more of a strategy and marketing company. You're working with Y Plan, saying you guys need to do this, this, this.
Right. So we're working with Y Plan in terms of helping them hire, which I actually didn't think that we would be doing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's almost like a recruitment firm.
Which I didn't want to get into. But the thing was, he was like, well, before we start anything, we need to hire a team. And I was like, actually, I know a ton of people that would love to work for Y Plan. So that's a great way to start working together. And in terms of the PR, we actually partner with a PR company in both New York and London. So they would handle the sort of reaching out to journalists. And the reason for that is that I'm a journalist and I don't want to be bugging my friends, but also because a lot of the content strategy work I do is about placing stories. And so it's a different kind of PR as opposed to hey, write about this.
Right.
But, that having been said, I've definitely hit up my friends and been like, you should write about this company. They're really awesome. I think that, gets back to who you choose to work with. Never choose a client or a member, as I call them, that you wouldn't want to work with full time. And then it won't really feel like pitching. You'll just be almost informing the journalists and giving them, this really great story to tell.
When I started London Real a couple years ago, I contacted a bunch of PR firms and social media experts, and they all had one thing in common, which was varying degrees of uselessness. I mean, they were just so bad, and I almost spent $10,000 at one point for something that I probably could have got on Fiverr.com, for those kind of metrics. And it's really frustrating, and I don't think it's maybe London per se, but a lot of the old school, maybe they hire a young kid and they're like, yeah, now we do this. But I can't seem to identify someone that can really add value to my brand.
So if you're talking about getting press, in the media.
Not just that, but yeah, that's one component.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in helping someone get a story placed in the Telegraph, but when it comes to the tech press, where I'm from, which is quite an insular scene, it's quite easy if you have a good product and you're someone that maybe reads their stories every single day, so you know what gets written on the blog. You know exactly how to marinate it and tell it right. In terms of adding to your brand, it's really hard because it's your brand, right? It's you think about this thing when you're sleeping, when you're having sex, every single day. And it's when you have someone come in and be like, oh, I can tell your brand story for you, or I can help you with marketing. It just doesn't always work, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
I just didn't think they had any good ideas, and they weren't telling me anything new, and I didn't see if I spent money with them they would add any value. That's the frustration I had.
Yeah, I'm sure it happens all the time. But a lot of the marketing work I do is all partnerships based. So it's let me introduce you to people you can partner with to double your user base, or to exchange emails or whatever it is. So it's about connecting people more than having some marketing campaign go out on Google AdWords.
Right, very strategic.
Yeah, it's just about knowing the networks really well. Maybe you have spent a week in London and you think you know some people, but I've spent now almost 3 years off and on. So I know that many more people, and that's where I would add value to a New York company.
Okay, you're pretty well plugged in.
Yeah, definitely.
You do so many things. I mean, there's even other stuff I didn't even mention because it would have taken me 5 minutes to introduce her, and sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. But you have so many things going on, and I just wonder how you multitask all of these things, because you probably could spend 110% time for Audience.io, not to mention all the other projects, and you're a journalist and all this stuff. So
yeah, so I do a lot of work with Makeshift, which is they're probably like 2 days before I announced the launch of Audienceio, I had already started working for them. So they're interesting because they're not really like a client or a member. They're just like someone that I love working with. And they're an early stage like multi-tech product company. And they're like a really new trend in what we're seeing with tech companies now. Either like a creative agency spins off a lab is sometimes what they're called. Or like just a startup says, I'm going to build like 10 products and see what works the next 3 months. So it's like this rapid development, prototyping, very like lean startup in terms of pushing it out. So I've just been helping them a lot in London and like love working for them. And then the other things I'm kind of involved in, like the journalism bits. At Audienceio, I have 2 or 3 people on my team, like 2.5. And I say, look, as part of your, I'm not going to send you to training or anything right now, like we're small, but as part of your work environment, you need to be writing a piece every 2 weeks that gets published somewhere from wherever you've had bylines before, or I can help you get a new media outlet that you've always wanted to write for. Just kind of a cool part of our culture. So writing's really important. So I write for Wired Magazine now. I haven't gotten my first piece published yet, but I'm working on 3 pieces for them, which is a little bit insane. So how I balance all that is I look at my days, really. I don't typically do coffee meetings with people to pick my brain or anything like that. What I do instead is every 2 weeks I host a dinner somewhere, either at my home or somewhere I've wanted to try, and I just get 10 people in the room.
10.
So like if there's someone that's like, I want to pick your brain, and I'm like, okay, cool, and then see how they act socially, and if they're like they're a real winner, then I'll like maybe go out with them after. But the benefit for them is like sometimes they do want to meet me, but even more so they want to meet my network. And so it's just like kind of killing 2 birds with one stone. It's just bringing them all to a dinner, and it's just one event as opposed to 10 during the day. I make it to the gym every single day as well. Either do on either side. And then I do work, like, I don't really watch TV shows other than Game of Thrones, like, and that's over. So now I've got all this time to do work.
I know, it's frustrating. Mad Men's over.
TV's too good, though, sometimes.
I don't know what to watch now, so.
And I take a lot of plane rides, so I get a lot of work done on those.
So 5 years from now, if you're winning, if you're doing like everything you want to do in 5 years from now, does that mean that Audience.io is huge? It's making lots of revenues, more companies, or does it mean something else is going well for you?
Good question. I don't think it's going to be huge. It's going to be really helpful, I hope. And if it's around in 5 years, I hope by that point it's also, me and 2 other people that are consistently running it almost as founders. So I'm like looking for those 2 people now. And I think like it'll still be in New York and London, because that was one of my initial inspirations for starting it, is I never want to give up either city. And I want to, build off of the 3460 miles community that I built and see like if I can turn that into a business. So far it's going really well. It's been 2 months though. So thinking 5 years ahead is like crazy. I mean, I'll be 33. So like I might, now I feel like I'm like got pregnant with Audience.io and I'm running around after this like 1-year-old business, and like when it's 6 years old or 5 years old, like I don't know. I just hope it's really helpful.
What school are they going to? Would you ever expand to like open up and to help companies maybe go to like Rio or something like that, or like,
definitely.
So help sort of connect the international.
I love that. So before I lived in London, I lived in Buenos Aires, and I've lived in my parents moved around quite a bit, so I have networks all over the US. And I think that's why I went with the name Audience.io. It's all about audience development as opposed to a name like my friend suggested, Atlantastic.
Atlantastic.
No, so I wanted to keep it open, because I think, for example, right now obviously San Francisco is quite a clear choice to help companies move to. I won't pretend to have the networks there that I do have in New York and London, so I would need to find someone. And there are people that have been quite excited in doing this anyway. And then Berlin right now is just killing it, and I feel like there's going to be a point where London becomes maybe unaffordable for a lot of startups from the States to move over. For someone that makes dollars to think about setting up in pounds, it's like,
and it's like 1-to-1, the real exchange rate, right? You have to pay someone $50,000 in the US, probably you have to pay them 50 sterling.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, to that point, the payment structures for startups is quite different in the New York, London scenes. So what I was saying is I think Berlin is going to be a really viable option for a lot of these startups to come over, and I think we're just going to be seeing a lot of cool stuff coming out of Berlin in the next 5 years.
Okay. London's a really unique city because the center of government is here. It's not like, Washington, D.C. is in New York. And I know you have done some work with 10 Downing and Tech City, is their advisory board. And I was just wondering, what was your biggest surprise and disappointment in working with the government? And yes, this is recorded.
It's fine. No, I got into a ton of trouble when I first moved over to London. I was working for GA.
You get into trouble?
Yeah, right. And I said something. I was on Reuters, and they said, well, what's the most surprising part about being in London? And I was like, the government's involvement. Right. And, GA looked at that, and they were like, shut up. Don't say anything, because 10 Downing was actually really supportive of bringing us over. And I actually have a lot of positive things to say about 10 Downing's involvement in the tech scene in Tech City. I mean, we've seen quite a few really valuable players leave the Tech City investment organization recently, which has been worrying. I imagine working for government is quite boring when you're surrounded by a bunch of entrepreneurs doing things at rapid speed. But anyway, so the sort of first reaction was whoa, what are they doing here? Because we had Bloomberg in New York that was really involved. He would show up to demo days and whatnot, but that made sense because it was local. And I think to have David Cameron and more importantly Rohan Silva when he was with David Cameron coming out and being in the tech scene, it was just wow, or when we were at 10 Downing, it was
Obama showing up somewhere.
Yeah, it was really intense, and they were just pouring money into this one part of London. And I think the most disappointing thing about what they're doing is that they're making East London the home of tech in London, and it's well, wait a minute, London's a massive city, and you're missing out on huge opportunities by not just saying London's a tech destination. Why aren't we also building up different parts of London, Clerkenwell and West where you live, right? Yeah. There's people over in Notting Hill. Are they not part of the tech scene?
Right. Does that include Cambridge too? I mean, do you want to make it really big?
I would stick to London as a city, okay. But yeah, Cambridge has got amazing things coming out of it. Yeah. But then, then it's kind of New York to Boston perhaps, and how those, we wouldn't call that all New York. So I think, widening, and just embracing all of London as this tech city, as opposed to just the Shoreditch and Old Street Roundabout would make more sense.
Okay. And what's it like dealing with the government? What is your capacity with them and Tech City?
I mean, it's really just breakfasts every few months, and then just getting up to speed on who's doing what. And they're quite formal. Bad coffee, good croissants.
Okay. I thought it would have been the opposite, maybe. Yeah. So it's formal there in suits, you go down to Parliament.
I mean, it's at 10 Downing, so you get dressed up, and I think I'll never get over the fact that I'm in front of this door with the number 10 behind it, at a meeting. Cool. Yeah, it feels really special. I have friends that have brought their U.S. companies over, and they've been welcomed at 10 Downing, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's being welcomed.
It is strange, and Ben Southworth was our first guest here, and he went from tech startup to the government, and then now he's back, and he was just talking about the power that they had. He was just we need more 4G coverage here, and they were done. Right. It was just the king was that's done. Yeah, exactly. And he was amazed by the power, also frustrated by some things that he wanted to get done more with curriculums, getting coding in the curriculums and stuff for children. So.
He was just talking yesterday about opening up the Tier 1 visa again for engineers and then judging their quality off of their GitHub profiles, and the government was GitHub, they just need to be educated, and that's totally fair. This isn't their job to read TechCrunch, right? But they should be appointing someone to educate them on that, and then kind of trust that person and forming policy around that. And I think that they did. I think Rohan Silva was from all intents and purposes on the outside looking in, really great for that. So yeah, I mean, I don't have too many complaints about what they're doing. I just think it's really crazy because it was much more organically developed in New York, and it was up to the people to kind of build these infrastructures, as opposed to the government.
Yeah.
Do you think Boris should be getting more involved?
Hell yeah.
That's the
Boris
local
looks like an awesome guy. I want him at more tech events.
Yeah. I know he was at the InnoTech Summit for the last 2 years, but yeah, he should be out a little bit more. I think he's such a charismatic guy.
I want him coming in on a zip line to the Silicon Drunkabout every Friday.
There we go. We'll talk to Bryce maybe.
He would do that. I think. I like Boris. He could do more.
He's such a character.
Yeah, he's a good character. A question for you: if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Courtney and give her a piece of advice, not that she would listen to you, but assuming she would, what would it be? And you can't tell her, just keep doing what you're doing, girl.
No.
You got to actually tell her something. Or is there any advice you would give that younger woman as far as career advice or any personal advice?
Yeah, I think I was in university at the time, paying quite a lot per year to go to a school in the middle of nowhere and sit on the quad and write poetry and like smoke hookah. Like, I feel like I could have spent my time much better. Either, I did travel quite a lot. I studied abroad, but even doing more of that as opposed to like 4 years down in Virginia, I did like maybe just one. And then like living in cities all over the world, I think, and then learning what I wanted to from the internet, like the way that education is going. I really hope that my kids don't go to university in the traditional sense.
Okay.
Like, there's just no point.
4 years.
Yeah, it makes
place.
especially as expensive as the states have their tuition set. It's like, 30, 40 grand a year.
Yeah.
That's
That's
ridiculous.
ridiculous.
I mean, you could go around the world. You can take cooking in Italy. You can go learn Mandarin. Like, it's endless possibilities. And like, we're sitting reading books and like a library. It just doesn't make sense.
Outdated business model, you think?
Yeah, I think I think it's tough though. I think you learn so much just growing up in university, like just getting things done on time, and do you know what I mean? Had tasks and getting things completed and working in groups. And if you just kind of just travel around
but
trying
if you
to
haven't
learn.
learned that in high school, it's like, what were you doing then?
Yeah, I was just not doing anything in high school. But
I didn't learn anything in high school.
I didn't learn anything in high school.
Especially nothing about social.
So how do we like inspire the 14-year-olds in us to like get a bit more serious about things earlier? And like at 20, I was like set on the right path, but at 15, 16, that's when I would like to just call myself and be like, girl, house parties on the weekends don't matter. Like this is
But they do when you're 15.
I know. Cake stands? No.
She would definitely hang up on you.
Maybe just a little bit less,
Okay.
It's just like the time spent. I feel like you only get a certain amount of cool points in your life. Like, don't blow them all when you're a teenager.
Cool points. What's a cool point?
Yeah, it's like, just physical body energy, like the ability to like I'm not able to go out and party the way I was when I was 16 and I'm only 28. Like, what? But
That's the worst part about growing up.
No comment.
The hangovers,
If I had like maybe stayed a bit steady on, like my friends that never partied in high school are now like at Burning Man every summer, and I'm like, oh man, just don't have the energy.
Right.
Left it all in, back of some kid's Jeep Wrangler.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. On that same note, what's the best advice you've ever been given?
Let's see.
I'm sure it's some journalistic advice, probably some old school writer.
Best advice. There's been so much, it's hard to pick one. One thing that comes to mind is I was like really nervous to leave New York City. And I was like, I feel like my network was there, right? Which feels like your literally your network is holding you up. And my friend just looks at me and he's just like, girl, the world, he's like this big gay man, the world is global, baby. Go enjoy it. And I was like, okay. And I was like, all right, cool. Because like it's, New York's always going to be there.
Right.
It's not like moving anywhere. It's not like I'm pissing people off by not being in New York, the wheels are turning. So like, I guess back to what I would tell a 20-year-old me is just like go out there and get as much experience as you possibly can.
A lot of people are scared to leave New York. It's the big show.
Right.
I
find the U.S. like that in general. Like
people always want to go back, I think.
But Americans, people from the U.S. don't travel that much, right? If you look, like there's so many people in the U.S., but a lot of them don't even have passports. Which
that's
blows me away.
Really weird.
Yeah.
Just to finish this advice question, I mean, you talked about the 15-year-olds and stuff like that. I'm sure there are going to be some teenagers watching this, and they're like, I want to be like Courtney one day.
Right.
I mean, she's really killing it.
Yeah.
You are really killing it, by the way. But what advice do you give to them, besides don't go to college? But I mean, if they're seeing all this excitement about the drink about, they're like, I want to do this. I want to start my own tech startup. I want to do this.
Yeah.
What's a simple piece of advice you would give them? Say 15.
Yeah, I mean, just like, get involved. This one amazing guy, Andrew Bracken, who I think is like 18 or 19, he came up to me. He was like this pipsqueak kid, like 16 years old, flew over from London to New York to go to the TechCrunch Disrupt conference. Boldly came right up to me and said, I read your writing, like,
really?
Love it, you're so cool. And I was like, you're totally not allowed to be drinking.
Put the beer down.
But that's awesome. And we hung out and we followed each other on Twitter. And this guy, like, just became so kind of with it, and he applied to Peter Thiel's program for like under 20 fellowships and got in, and now he's in San Francisco, like living the dream, you know. But you know, just that kind of ambition is awesome, and it's
Just
so
do
much
it.
easier to do now because
Right.
you can just reach out to people on Twitter. You can like see what's happening on the internet, as opposed to like when you and I were growing up and we were like in chat rooms on AOL being like ASL question mark, like it was really different. We didn't know.
I didn't grow up in chat rooms.
You didn't?
But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, age, sex, location question mark was ASL.
I didn't know that either.
Oh no.
See, you said too much.
The internet really didn't start picking up for me until kind of I hit university almost.
Oh really? How old are you?
Yeah, 31.
Okay.
Yeah, later for me.
See, like,
Yeah.
I'm 28, so I
Right.
literally got on the internet as I hit puberty at like
Right.
12
Yeah.
or 13. Like, it was just kind of a weird thing there, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, growing up without it as a 10-year-old, and then all of a sudden,
Dial up.
you're alive
Yeah.
and you're on the internet.
But I agree with you. Never underestimate the power of your own hustle. 'Cause,
Yeah.
like even with London Real, if I get someone coming in and they're pitching me, and then they were pitching me the next week, and they're pitching me, I'm like, who is this kid?
Yeah.
All right, I'll meet you. You know, if you're really coming out and you're putting it all on the line. And I don't see enough of that.
No.
I don't. A lot of people give up. They this half-assed try.
Yeah.
So I think.
Yeah, getting out there and just doing it.
Yeah, if you think you don't have the degree or you don't have the resources or not, just the hustle and the drive can get you there. And people are impressed by that stuff.
And I think, like, New York teaches people how to hustle. I mean, I had this one friend that was amazing. Like, in order to start his own cooking show, he would be like doing things in Central Park, like selling granola bars. Like, he'd find these jobs on Craigslist, which is like our Gumtree, like how to quick, you know, make a few bucks an hour just to like pay rent and whatnot to get his own thing started. You know, hopefully you don't have to do that anymore. If you're like over the age of 26 or 27, you've built up enough connections to maybe get some investment if you need to. But yeah, I mean, when you're 20 and you're young, it's just like you got to learn to hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hustle in New York. They
They
teach
do,
people
yeah.
how to hustle. We're going to wrap this up, but I just wanted to just get your perspective on one final thing. I mean, we see all these businesses building, like you creating Y Plans, New York Strategy, and all these startups, and it's like it seems like they're all trying to rush and to be the first one to do something successfully. And when you have an organization of like 20, 50, 100 people, like you're hiring and stuff, like what's like the one thing, like John Collison said they had a way of communicating where everyone was on these email groups, and when the lawyers signed a document, they told the whole company about its success. And
Yeah.
when the sales team did something, the whole company found out about the success. But what's like the most important thing when it comes to you giving advice to say Y Plan or someone else, as far as just the communication factor and just people working together and talking and staying on the same, you know, vibe?
Yeah, so
Because that could screw something up, right?
It's true, and I've worked on a few global teams before, and I've worked on one global team where we were constantly talking all day long, and we had like, it wasn't like an intranet, but I mean, I guess it kind of was. It was chatting, and we were talking and sharing what we were reading, and just maintaining company culture across these digital divides. And the other company I worked for where we didn't have that was so different. It was just kind of like you get this email from someone that was like, no, you're doing it wrong. The really hard part about that is that because you're not in real life with them, they can't also pat you on the back on your way to like the water cooler to
Right.
show you that there's like love involved too and teamwork. So I think like just thinking about that as you're growing your global team, like it's so important for founders to be in the new city with their new team as opposed to just letting the expansion happen. Well, you know, we're not as involved with Y Plan strategy yet, but like we had a conversation with their team, and they're moving like most people over to New York. You know, like that's like a major part of their strategy is just to be there. You know, and then I think like the founders probably plan to live on a plane between New York and London for the next 2 years, and that's just kind of what you have to do. I know it's like really hard and expensive. That gets back to like what we were saying earlier. It's like this takes a lot of money.
But
to
they have
do.
one shot to get it right. I mean, you said Foursquare probably didn't get it right. Can
Yeah.
they try a second time or not?
I think Foursquare like could have tried a second time, but now it's been like 2 or
Okay.
3 years, so it'd be a little weird.
It feels like Y Plan has one shot. I mean, probably from a financial issue, they have one shot to build that brand.
Yeah.
But then the public is probably not going to take version 2.0.
So I think Foursquare, if they pivoted like their value add, could. I think Y Plan needs to get it right the first time because we've seen companies just like Y Plan in New York already start up and fail.
Right.
Okay.
So
Wow. Pressure.
yeah, pressure's so on for them. I love it.
Yeah, it's true.
But I've never met a team with like as dynamic talents that work together so well as that team.
Yeah, I saw them at Le Web too, and yeah, that's when I downloaded it.
I heard an interview with their CEO, so it was good. Yeah, good stuff. I have to apologize to John and Ben because Courtney's my favorite guest. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I mean, we could talk for hours. You have a lot of really interesting things to say and really good perspectives.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And I'm glad you're over here because it's nice to get the New York perspective over here. But you don't have a everything sucks in London vibe. You guys don't know what to do in New York. We got it right. It's good to try to see the benefits of the London culture. And we were talking to Bryce about that. The fact that you can go to these drinkabouts and it's a relaxed day at the pub. It's not just a speed dating pitch night. Right. There are some benefits of that.
No, London's a really inspiring, wonderful place to be, and I think it's connecting the two cities that I want to be doing more of.
Awesome. What a great niche for you. That's cool.
That's great.
All right, well, that's it. Silicon Reel, it's about the people. If you want to check us out, we're on Twitter, we're on iTunes now, or on Facebook, and we're just going to keep doing these every week, some interesting person in the London tech startup scene. This is fun as hell.
It's fun. And if you have any advice or any, videos or pictures or, guests, man, it's for the community. So.
Yeah, total community feel. So tell us who you want, and if you even have any footage or pictures of the scene, I'll put it in the intro. And we're just doing this with your help. If it wasn't for the Beards and Bens and all these people giving us ideas, we couldn't do this on our own. So, so there you go. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
Okay, take care.
Welcome to London.
You need to be good at taking that into your stride. And one thing that's been really cool to see as the company has grown is, when you start out, you're these you're 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people working on this idea, and it's not even clear if this idea is a good idea, and it's not even clear if anyone will use it, and it's very much you in this uncertain